They call it the Devil's Mile, a stretch of forgotten interstate that slices through the heart of Nevada, where the desert sun bakes the morality out of a man and leaves behind only need and greed. For the rest of the world, this road is just asphalt. For us, the Steel Vipers Motorcycle Club, it is our lifeblood, our territory, and the domain where we administer a justice far older and more permanent than anything handed down from a bench. We are the 1%ers, the ones who recognize that law and order are often just words painted on the side of a decaying building. True justice requires steel, silence, and an unwavering code. In every outlaw organization, there is a man who acts as the conscience, the one who defines the boundary between necessary criminality and meaningless brutality. For the Steel Vipers, that man was Elias, the Judge Thorne. Not the president, not the VP, but the club's enforcer. He earned the moniker because his decisions were final, and his methods were cold, precise, and utterly fair. By our metrics, the judge was a legend, a man whose presence was heavy, like the promise of rain in a drought. He enforced the outlaw code, and under his watch, the Vipers protected the helpless, even as they broke every other law on the books. The desert is vast, but news travels fast, carried on the static of CB radios and the whispers of desperate people. The current trouble was centered in Redemption Valley, a small, independent community built on the hope of a forgotten mining venture. They weren't under our direct protection, but they were close enough to hear the roar of our engines. The problem wasn't a rival club or a government agency. It was a local land baron named Silas Rourke. Rourke wasn't a thug. He was worse. He was a corporation wrapped in a cheap suit, using predatory loans and fabricated property disputes to systematically squeeze the families of Redemption Valley off their ancestral land. He wanted the water rights, the mineral rights. He wanted everything. He was using legal paperwork as a weapon, tying the locals up in courts miles away, draining their funds until they had no choice but to sign away their deeds for pennies. The law was his shield, and desperation was his ally. The Vipers wouldn't have cared, except for one thing. Rourke wasn't just stealing land. He was threatening a generational way of life, particularly targeting the widows and elderly families who lacked the resources to fight back. Their pleas for help fell on deaf ears in the distant county seat. They were abandoned. A young woman named Mara, whose family had run the only feed store in the valley for 50 years, rode a hard-worn pickup truck 200 miles into Viper territory just to talk to the judge. She didn't offer money. She offered the truth. Rourke's men were using intimidation, polluting the local well on her property, and threatening to seize her deeds in a rigged civil action the next week. Mara met the judge in the back room of our central clubhouse, the Pit. She didn't beg. She laid out the facts like a prosecutor, her voice strained with fatigue, but firm with defiance. She spoke of her grandmother, who had built that store with her own hands, and of the fear gripping the entire valley. The judge listened, leaning back in his chair, his hands resting on the worn leather of his vest. He saw not a mark for exploitation, but a victim of the system's cowardice. He saw honor in her fight. "You came to the Vipers," the judge finally said, his voice deep and gravelly. "You know what we are. We don't fill out paperwork. We only collect. And the currency is always pain." Mara met his gaze, unflinching. "If my family is going to lose everything, I want it to be a clean fight, Judge. I want them to pay the price for the evil they're doing. The law won't make them pay. You will." That was the line, the invocation of their code. Mara wasn't asking for salvation. She was demanding justice through an outlaw lens. "Mara," the judge said, a flicker of grudging respect in his eyes, "go home, lock your doors, and tell your neighbors to stand tall. The Steel Vipers are riding to Redemption Valley. The books are about to be balanced." He gathered his chosen crew, Shadow, the club's tracker, a man whose silence was heavier than most men's noise, and Reaper, our newest patch holder, eager to prove his worth in the application of the code. The ride was a ritual. 3 bikes, moving like dark spirits across the open road. This wasn't a raid. It was an enforcement action. The judge explained the parameters. Rourke's operation was built on legal fear. not physical force. We weren't there to kill the man. We were there to dismantle his engine of corruption and make the damage utterly undeniable to any court. We were applying road justice to white-collar crime. Rourke and his boys used paper to steal homes, the judge dictated, his voice sharp over the rush of the wind. We used steel to steal their operation. No innocent blood, but the books, the contracts, the legal rigging. We burn it all. And Rourke will be left alive to face the debt collectors we are leaving behind, the people of Redemption Valley. Shadow nodded, adjusting the tools in his saddlebag. Not guns, but specialized equipment for electronic and structural disassembly. Reaper simply gripped his handlebars tighter, his jaw set. He understood. This was the honor of the 1%er. To be the worst men doing the necessary job the good men refused to touch. They were the shadows where true consequences lived. They were nearing Redemption Valley. The sun was setting, casting long, menacing shadows from the few remaining water towers. The judge felt the familiar surge of purpose. He wasn't a saint, but in this moment, enforcing honor against institutionalized evil, he was the closest thing to a moral anchor this desolate country had. He was the judge, and court was about to be adjourned. Rourke's base of operations in Redemption Valley was a prefabricated office complex, aggressively modern and offensively out of place against the dusty, sun-bleached landscape. It stood as a monument to his avarice. The judge and his crew approached under the cloak of midnight, the only sound the crunch of their boots on the dry gravel. The engines shut down miles away. This was not a quick smash and grab. It was a targeted act of systemic destruction, the dismantling of a weapon. The security was standard, relying on motion sensors and cheap cameras, banking on the remoteness of the location to deter anything more serious than bored teenagers. But they weren't dealing with teenagers. They were dealing with men who lived outside the rules, whose specialized knowledge of infiltration was honed by years of avoiding the law. Shadow, our tracker, disabled the external power grid with a swift, clean cut, plunging the complex into absolute darkness. The silent alarm might have triggered, but the local police were Rourke's employees, and their response time was measured in hours, not minutes. The Vipers had a window, and they intended to use every second. The judge breached the main door. Inside, the place was a labyrinth of cheap filing cabinets and expensive server racks. This was the heart of Rourke's operation. The paperwork, the digital contracts, the manipulated figures that stole futures. They moved with practiced speed. Reaper was tasked with securing the exits and ensuring no one, neither Rourke's skeletal night crew nor any innocent bystanders, interfered. He found two low-level clerks asleep at their desks, exhausted by the relentless work Rourke demanded. Reaper, honoring the judge's code, simply zip-tied their wrists and ankles, gagged them, and left them tucked under their desks. They were irrelevant, small cogs in a much larger machine, and the outlaw code dictates that vengeance must be applied only to the architects of the injustice. The judge and Shadow headed straight for the server room, the vault of the digital evidence. Shadow, a former electrical engineer who'd found better pay and more honest work with the Vipers, was the key. While the judge stood watch, a silent, menacing Shadow went to work on the mainframe. He didn't just delete the data, he executed a complex digital scorched earth policy, encrypting and corrupting Rourke's entire ledger system, wiping the legal records, the loan agreements, the fabricated tax liens, all of it. He didn't just erase the evidence of the crimes. He erased the very basis of Rourke's ownership claims on the Redemption Valley properties. In the adjacent office, the judge found the physical records, the hard copies of the manipulated deeds and the predatory contracts. He systematically stacked the boxes in the center of the main floor. He poured the accelerant. This was the final act of the enforcement, a visible, undeniable statement to the world and to Rourke. As the scent of gasoline filled the air, a car pulled up outside. Rourke himself, alerted by the failure of the security system, had arrived, driving his own expensive sedan, arrogantly believing he could intimidate a power failure into submission. He burst through the front door, shouting, his face a mask of panic and rage, only to be confronted by the immense figure of the judge. standing amidst the funeral pyre of his financial empire. "Thorn, what in God's name are you doing?" Rourke shrieked, recognizing the steel viper's patch instantly. He knew the legends. The judge lit a single match. The tiny flame danced, a moment of fragile light against the heavy darkness. "We are correcting the ledger, Rourke. You used the law to steal lives. We're using the outlaw code to give them back." He dropped the match. The flames erupted instantly, consuming the paper, the contracts, the years of systemic greed in a furious, crackling roar. Rourke lunged forward, not for his life, but for the burning evidence. The judge intercepted him with a clean, measured blow, the kind that breaks a man's spirit before it breaks his bones. Rourke collapsed weeping, watching his power turn to ash. "This is road justice," the judge stated, his voice calm over the fire. "The people of Redemption Valley are debt collectors now. You come near their land again and you won't face us. You'll face them. We've given them their fight back." The vipers retreated into the darkness, leaving Rourke alone with the burning ruins of his legal empire. They left him alive, stripped of his power, to be dealt with by the community he had tormented. That was the ultimate justice, making the predator vulnerable to his former prey. They rode back through the canyons under a clear, star-dusted sky. The judge didn't speak. He didn't need to. He had enforced the code, not for profit, but for honor. He was a bandit, a one-percenter, a man outside the bounds of civilized society, yet he had delivered a justice more profound and equitable than any court had offered. The myth of the judge was sealed that night. It wasn't about finding God. It was about defining the moral center of the wicked world they inhabited. It was about proving that the roughest men often carry the straightest code. The steel vipers didn't seek absolution. They sought balance, and on the Devil's Mile, balance was restored.